Hello and welcome to another episode of Scavenger Life. This is episode number 305 at scavengerlife.com.
Welcome to Trash Elf Radio.
You trash elf.
Okay, so this week we went to an auction.
We did.
Yep, and we always enjoy going to auctions. And I want to say something very, like a controversial statement.
Yeah.
I think if you're not going to auctions, you're leaving a lot of money on the table.
That's interesting.
You're missing out.
Why?
Well, because, I mean, this is my hot take, okay? I think that this is probably one of the largest wealth transfers in human history. From, like, baby boomers.
And the greatest generation.
And the greatest generation in the world. Is transferring just such a large amount of wealth to everybody else. You know?
Right.
And this happens very often. And, I mean, there's one small snapshot in these auctions. Because, yes. I mean, as you've said it's before, most auctions are basically estate sales.
Right.
You know?
Because they clean out, like, auction houses are cleaning out estates.
And you know, and people are like, oh, you know, it just happens. Like, this is how it always is. I don't think so. I think this is a very interesting kind of small slice of time that's not going to last forever, you know?
I mean, we have to preface it, and we've said this all the time, where there was a time after World War II in America where the ability to buy a house and buy goods and, you know, clothe your children for cheap and feed your children for cheap was so abundant and crazy that these generations were able to acquire property, acquire furniture, acquire art.
Basically, it's two generations. I mean, where you could be like a high school graduate.
Right.
Or maybe not even a high school graduate, but live in a middle class a lifestyle with, you know, multiple cars, with a house, with a vacation house, with a great retirement, and, you know,
a pension.
And these generations have acquired, you know, a large amount of wealth, and now they're at the end of their lives, and they're either dying
or downsizing,
and their stuff being given away, or they're downsizing and moving into, like, you know, a Florida condo or something like that. So anyway, these auctions are where this is happening, and it's really interesting and exciting, you know, because there's such like a wealth and just so much different kinds of stuff.
Right, it's a huge variety.
You know, and this has everything to do with something we talked about, you know, a couple podcasts ago, and that's like having the imagination.
Right.
To do this, you know, this isn't going and buying like commodity goods, like give me, you know, 1,000 iPhone cases and also those.
Right.
This is like you go, and this is how a lot of auctions seem to operate.
Yeah,
it comes in two parts.
Right.
The first part is in like one half of the auction house where everything's kind of like jumbled on tables.
Like box lots, or they call them box lots or table lots.
Right. So where if you're not bidding on individual items, it's like you're walking around its room and you're huddled around tables, and the guy is auctioning off like an entire table or box or pallet of stuff, and it's just like a jumble. And the cool thing is, it's not like on TV where you can't really touch things.
You can pick stuff up, look around
before it starts, and you can go through the boxes and look at everything. And
it's not like Storage Wars, that show where they're like, you can only peer in and you aren't allowed to touch. It's like, it's great. You can shuffle through, which is a disadvantage sometimes, because sometimes people will move stuff out of boxes.
I really don't think that.
You don't think it happens very much?
I've only seen that happen one time where we bought a lot and there was something that was supposed to be in there
and it was
gone.
Yeah.
Only one time in the hundreds of auctions we've been to. People are normally, it's pretty good about it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you're bidding on a whole lot of stuff, and oftentimes you can get a whole table or box of stuff for definitely under $100. Very often for like $20.
I mean, under.
Sometimes for $5, you know.
Yeah, it's
so
like,
when we talk about filling up our car for a couple $100, that's one way to do it.
Yeah.
You know? And then the second half of the auction is more like the fancier stuff. And it's more of the traditional auction that people think of where,
Right.
you know, the auctioneer's like kind of either on a pedestal or on a chair.
Yeah.
And everyone's kind of like, you know, hanging out, and they bring up individual items, furniture,
These are the high
rugs,
end.
fancier stuff, and people are bidding on individual items, and those can go for, you know,
Thousands sometimes.
hundreds of dollars to sometimes thousands, depending on what kind of auction
Right.
that you're in. So most times we still kind of focus on the box lots,
Right. But we find great stuff
the
back
table
there.
lots, right? Like this last week, we spent a little over $500.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, we're trying to spend a little bit more, you know, so $500 is, you know, a significant amount of money for
But there are
us.
sellers there. I mean, there are other sellers clearly who are spending easily way more than that.
Sure,
You know?
yeah.
But
Yeah, I mean, you know, we kind of dabble in the upfront part of the auction, but, you know, that gets expensive. Like if you're buying, you know, stuff for $200-300, and if you buy, you know, 3 or 4 of those things,
You're like-
suddenly you're into, you know,
$1,000 you spent, you know. But if you have that money, go for it.
And what I find at auctions is, I would say 90% of people there are dealers.
Yes.
People that have shops, or they sell online,
Right.
or something.
They do something.
But they're buying to sell.
Yeah.
You know, so and then only 10% are just like kind of people off the street who are just kind
Yeah.
of coming to buy for themselves.
Right.
And oftentimes the guy who runs the auction will know most of the people there because
like they've
come,
memorized their numbers.
Right.
Like they have numbers where they have a permanent number
Right.
where
They come
they're not
every
even
single
holding
week.
their numbers
Yeah.
up, you know.
but you know, it's still open to
Anyone.
everybody, you
Yeah.
know. So but you know, that is the interesting thing, and the reason why we love it is because it's, you just never know what you're going to get. I mean, like, you know, when we buy a table of stuff, the way I do it is there has to be at least one thing there that I want.
Yeah.
You know? So I'm like, okay, out of this whole table or this whole box of maybe 100 items, I know there's this one item. I know if I get it, we can sell it for $75. So I'll peg my
Right.
price for
On
the
that.
whole box for that. So I'm willing to pay
You know
for the
how
whole
much,
thing.
yeah.
And then the cool thing is, then when we come home and we kind of spread it all out and start to do its research, I know we can make our money back.
Right.
And then you just start to realize all this other stuff we got is great.
Right.
And there's always like a small box of stuff that we end up giving back or that we donate.
Yeah.
But for the most part, we end up, you know, being able to sell almost all of it.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, I think we're pretty good at that.
Now, let me ask you, Ryan.
Yes.
I think one thing that some people may kind of poo-poo on auctions is that it's very it can be high stress or like very aggressive or,
Sure.
you know, did you talk about that?
Well, the thing for me is, like, a lot of people don't like that out in the open competitiveness, where it's different than being in a thrift store, where if you'll see other sellers, you're like, I gotta put it in your cart. Don't lose your cart. Don't, you know, like, don't keep your eyes off your cart, you know? There's that. But then when an auction is very different, because you're just out in the open, you're like, I'm bidding. Everyone can see that I want this. Clearly they know that I know that it's valuable,
So
you know?
why don't you like that part of it? I mean, I guess I hadn't been
Because-
expecting that answer.
Because, like I was saying, in a thrift store, you can kind of lay low, or at a yard sale or whatever. I mean, you're kind of gathering your stuff, and no one's really like, oh, you think that's valuable? It's like they think you're shopping for yourself, so it doesn't really matter. But when you're at an auction, you have to be like, you got to make sure you're seen. That's the whole point. If you're not, you don't get the item.
Right.
So it's hard for people who are introverted to
Right.
be like, yeah.
Yeah.
But at the same time, once you start going and you're paying attention, you notice that even the, in quotes, professional sellers are goofing off over in the corner.
Right.
And they're actually not paying attention, and they probably missed like 5 good things because
Right.
they were on their phone.
See, so
you know, so you're like, okay, I know
that's
what I'm
not
doing.
the answer that I thought that you were going to
Was he?
give me. So I think
funny.
one argument or against auctions I hear, or one reason why people are afraid to go, is that it's very fast paced.
It's fast, yeah.
And that's kind of like that's built in. Like, it's purposely that way because, I mean, number one, there's so much to get through. Like, it may take, and I'll talk about this in a bit, 5 hours to sell a whole home of stuff. But it's also built that way because you can start spending a lot of money very quickly.
Right.
And I think one thing that people get nervous about is that, the guy's talking very fast, that kind of auctioneer kind of way. Right. 5, 6, and if you have to, pay attention to that, and very quickly it can go from $5 to $100. And I'm not saying people are like, oh, I didn't know I just spent $100, but I think when you're at a thrift store, it's nice to have the time to be like, this item's $20.
Should I get it? Yeah.
Let me look on my phone. You can debate about it. You can put it in your cart and kind of think about it and, make, sane choices.
Right.
But at an auction, you kind of have to go and preview everything. Make it you got to make a choice of like, I want this item, and then put a limit on how much you'll pay, and then just go. And then as soon as that item's done, they're on to the next one. Thing. There isn't a lot of time to think.
That's
and sorry, and real quick, and I've seen you get flustered by that, where you get a little overwhelmed and you kind of shut down.
Well, I have a hard time going high against other sellers sometimes, where I'm like, yeah, I really want that thing, but I don't want to pay that price. And I'm making that and I've made that calculation, but I'm on the fly making that calculation where, you have to make that decision. Okay, he went up to 100 on that light fixture. Are you willing to go to 120? And you're like, gah. And then you have to, and they're the auctioneer's looking at you because it's you and the other guy, and you have to be like, no, or you have to be like, yes, and then be willing to keep going and going. So,
but that's okay. I mean, I think that's the skill of someone good at auctions is.
So I'm super frugal, and I don't want to pay anything. Yeah. So it's hard for me to go to auctions sometimes.
Right. There have been times when you've started to bid on something, and you'll stop, and then I'll pick it up. Yeah. Because we do as a team. Right. And then I'll pick it up, and then I'll get it for a higher price because I'm like, come on.
We're going to do it. Yeah.
You're being too frugal.
But I'm like being too frugal. But that being said, at the last auction, for the first half of the auction, I was the one who bought everything.
You were very good.
I was like, geez, not bidding on anything. But the good thing was the good thing for me was I was super focused, and I was listening to every item. It can get boring. You're like, oh my God, there's so many of these little tchotchke things that they're doing that I don't want. But if I don't pay attention, I'll miss the thing I do want. And what I was doing was, anytime there was something that I thought was decent, but people just were like, that's junk, I would get it. Because I'm like, no, that I could actually do something with that. So you brought up a very good topic, and this is something else that I hear people be like, oh, I don't want to go to auctions because it takes too long. And that's the thing. Going to an auction is a time investment. Like, it's for us, it's an all-day thing. I mean, it can easily be 5 hours and sometimes more. Yeah. I mean, we often don't stay for the entire part of the auction, It's grueling, yeah.
But, it really is a grueling thing. But that's one of the competitive advantages. If you're willing to go, stick it out, and pay attention to every little thing that's being sold, very often there'll be a table like we wouldn't have bought. Right. But because we're paying attention and no one's bidding on it, that's when you can get a whole table of stuff for $5. And then at that point, it's like, I mean, we can't lose money here. I mean, those are the kind of things where you can make $1,000 just because you're paying attention. And
so that was the way that I did it. Look, part of it too, because it's an endurance thing. We always eat before. I'm like, you have had a meal before this. And you have a coffee in your hand if that's what you need. Yep. And the auction's starting and you went to the bathroom. Like, you're ready, you're focused. And there are times where I haven't done that, and I'm like, I'm just tired and I'm hungry. Yeah. No. Right. Like, that is not the time to be tired and hungry.
It's like an athletic event. Right?
It is. So, you have to be, and that time, last time, I had just eaten. I had eaten like a good snack in the car because it's a long drive for us. and I had breakfast at this little place next door. So I was like, I'm good to go. I'm focused. I've eaten. I've had my coffee. And I'm paying attention to everything, you know.
So I'm going to say another hot take.
Hot take, yeah.
I think that auctions are like a NASCAR for scavengers.
It's like a sport. Like you said, a sporting event.
But in the sense of like, it's a very active, like high energy event.
Yeah.
You know? And it's not for babies, you know?
Definitely
and
not.
it's like going to a NASCAR event where it's loud and just like there's a lot of
chaotic.
action happening.
Yeah.
And the other thing too, which I really like about auctions, is that, you know, in this modern America, 2017, you know, like so many places that we all congregate, like, you know, Walmart, Starbucks. I mean, I don't know,
Target.
just like it's just all these kind of like corporate public spaces that have been built for us where we seem to congregate. You know, so many kind of like small family businesses have just disappeared, you know. The auction place is the last place that I've been able to find where it's normally run by a family. And there's just like a group of regulars and it just feels very homey.
Yeah.
A lot of character.
Right.
There's a lot of kookiness, you know.
Like you feel... I mean, there are regulars that are there all the time, every single day for years. But you're like, you get those people. Like, you're there and you're like, okay, these are my people.
I mean, part of the fun for me is like kind of starting to attend the same auction on a regular basis and getting to know the people. You know, and getting to know the other dealers, figuring out how they sell, if they have stores, if they have eBay stores, find out it's what their specialties are, if it's some specialty that I've never heard of, to kind of learn about it. Just to learn about their lives, about how long they've been doing this. It's just so interesting because you really are, you know, some of these people are like, most of them are older, in their 50s and 60s, and they've been doing this a long time. Most of them are not on eBay. So, I mean, these are like the original scavengers, you know, and so it's always interesting to hear how they built a life on just buying and selling junk. You know?
And they keep doing it. You know? So, and it's funny too when you get to know what people bid on. Like you'll see a piece and you're like, I know that person's gonna bid against me on this. I know it, and it's true, and it happens. And you just have to be prepared to, you know, go head to head with some people.
It's like at this auction. It seems like every auction we have a
nemesis.
It's nemesis, you know, someone who like loves the same things we do and is willing to pay for
more.
it. And so it's like every time that thing that I really want, I know I'm gonna have to go head to head.
That's why we had to pay a bunch of money for this one table lot.
At this auction, it's one particular guy, and you know he's willing to pay a lot of money.
He's
for
a
stuff.
seller for sure,
and he knows how much things are worth. So this one table. It was a whole table of stuff, a lot of like glassware. I didn't care about that stuff. There was a box of perfume. Like
high end.
There must have been, it's 50 bottles of perfume, half of them new in box,
sealed.
Although they were sealed. They were not fake.
No, they were real.
With, you know, all the fancy brands.
Dior, Givenchy, like
I mean all
just
these
like stuff that so Chanel.
I mean, I was like, man, one of these bottles is easily worth $200. So I was like, I'm going for this. And I remember when that table came up, I just had my hand up. You just
kept your hand up,
and my eyes were locked on the auctioneer. And this guy, who I knew was going to bid against me, started to bid against me, and I just would not stop. And then I got it for $225.
$225 for a whole table.
Because that was his. I guess that was his calculation. He didn't want to go over $200,
and that was our calculation too.
It was great.
But
and there's nothing like that feeling
of winning. You won against your nemesis. It was a high dollar table. Yeah. But the funny thing was, I was eyeing that table and people looking at that stuff, and there were people that were like, who the hell would buy this used perfume? It's just junky. And I saw the other guy look at it, and he was like, yeah, it's junky. I was like, I know what you're doing. You're trying to get everybody else not to bid on this. Like, the other thing, too, is a lot of sellers who do antiques and furniture and art, They're not looking at perfume. They're like, what am I? But if you're an eBay seller, you're looking at perfume.
It's like I said, it's good to start to get to know the regular people that are coming and to figure out what their specialty is. So that way you kind of know, oh, none of the regulars here like, this Danish thing. Modern furniture.
Which is not true.
It's when that comes up,
I'll grab it.
We're going to be good.
Yeah. And it is funny to see other people who you're like, I'm pretty sure they sell on eBay because they're willing to get smaller shippable stuff.
Right.
Like there's some people where I'm like, you clearly sell furniture for a living because you buy every piece of furniture. Yeah. Or people like this guy, I'm like, I'm pretty sure he sells on eBay too. Maybe not his whole spiel is on eBay, but
yeah,
part of it.
So anyway, we just wanted to talk about that. We've talked about auctions many times before, but this time it's reminding me how much I love it.
Yeah.
And just how much money we make from these auctions.
We can, yeah.
And what a special time. I mean, I don't know, maybe this period, it will last another 10...
I think it's going to be longer than that.
Years?
Yeah, I think it's going to be longer than that.
You think?
Yeah.
I mean, 10, 15... I mean, I don't know. Who knows, but... it's starting.
It has started.
It has started. That this transfer of wealth has started, and I just don't know if like our Generation X, or a younger, if we're going to have the same accumulation of stuff that we'll be trying to give away at auctions.
Yeah,
I just don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, let's just get into
move on.
It's nitty gritty here. Let's talk about our week on eBay. Okay. So something last week we talked about, and some people on the forum were talking about the scan sheet.
Yes, so you can get a scan sheet for your postal worker that basically, if you ship 10 packages, instead of them scanning each one individually, they can scan this sheet, and those packages will be marked as scanned.
And something I learned, and it's not about like it's a sheet and they have to scan like 10 things. It makes a single barcode, and once that one barcode is scanned, everything gets scanned.
It's like a batch.
And this could solve the problem for a lot of people if their carriers are too lazy or
to scan each package.
Well, I just want to say that. But just aren't scanning all the packages. Right. Now, I asked you why you don't do that, and you said, well, you like to pack at different times of the day. And what people were saying was, well, you can still pack all throughout the day, just don't print labels except at one time.
Yeah, I don't want to do that.
No?
Like, I love having it ready to go. Like, yeah. I basically want it off my page of waiting to be shipped. I'm like, this is processed. It is in the little IKEA bag, ready to go out the door. Right. The other thing too is no one gave me a link to where to get the scan sheet. I was like, where is it? I can't find where it is. And I don't know if you only get it through doing you can do bulk shipping on eBay where you just are like, boom, 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 print these 10 labels instead of one by one by one, which is how I like to do it. So I make sure everything is going to the right places. So I don't know where you get the scan sheet if you're printing labels one by one. So somebody please send me that link.
They're like, why don't you Google it?
Why don't you Google it? Like you tell everyone.
Well, I think the other thing too is, we don't have the impetus to do it because
our people scan.
Our postal carrier is really good about scanning our packages.
I mean, one of our carriers, because we have two carriers that switch off depending on who has a day off. One of our carriers sits in her van in front of our house and scans every single package at that moment. And I was like, can't you just scan them when you get back? She's like, nope. She's super meticulous. She's like, I want them all scanned when I get them. So
But for people who regularly complain that, they have like substitution people all the time and, there's no consistency, it's with their carrier pickup. This could be one way to do it is the scan sheet.
Because they can't avoid the scan sheet. You'd hope,
Right. And one other thing, just talking about eBay, something we were thinking of. So we love to put its best offer on a lot of items. And normally we do it on items over it's $50 because there's enough meat on the bone to be able to give people its money off. But one thing that is it's frustrating with eBay is that people can put in a price of how much they're willing to pay,
Right.
and then they give a field of what their terms are. And most people don't put anything in there.
Right.
But the one thing some people put in is free shipping.
Like, my terms are, I want you to ship this for free.
And above that field, eBay even has in kind of gray text, your price will not include free
shipping
for free. So it's kind of like, and supposedly eBay will back you up if someone puts that in there because they can't do that. So I'm just like, why just take that field away? Like,
don't have terms. What terms could you be dictating?
Right, just let someone put a price and that's it.
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, the thing about make offer and terms, you're like, what terms besides shipping would anybody give?
Like, I want this ironed, or I don't know.
I mean, and also you're like, if there is some terms or questions you have, you should message. I mean, maybe they should say, not terms, but message to buyer or something. Like, if someone wants to ask a question at the same time as making an offer, I see where that makes sense. But
no.
terms?
That doesn't make sense, because if you don't want someone like, it's $60 and be like,
does this work?
Does
People
this smell?
do it anyway.
I mean, well, so do I
Take it away.
answer your question, or do I take the offer? I mean, it's like, no, give me a price.
Give me an offer, that's
Ask it questions outside of the offer.
Right,
So
exactly.
I don't know why they have those terms or what they expect them to be in there, but they should
get rid of that.
They should rethink that.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's talk about the Scavenger of the week.
Obviously, it's that box of perfume that you paid $200 for.
Yep. So, like I said, there's probably at least 40 bottles.
There's a lot. I don't think there's 40, but there's a lot. Oh, go count them. Where are they?
Well, there's a big box, and we know we've done very well with.
We have done well with
perfume.
So,
another thing is, we stopped by a thrift store on the way home from an auction because we just couldn't get enough.
Yeah.
And they were giving away hymnals.
Right.
They just had these 2 boxes of hymnals,
Yeah.
and I was like, how I'd like to buy
how much
these.
are they?
And they were like, oh, we're just giving them away. I was like, I'll take them all. So we've done very well with hymnals. Like, and these are normally older hymnals. I mean, these specific ones are Baptist hymnals.
Right. Explain what a hymnal is for anyone who doesn't know.
Oh, really?
Because I'm like... Yeah. I know what it is now, but I didn't know before. So if you go
to church, people sing songs, and hymnals are like the songbooks. They have like the words that people sing, and
like a hymn.
Yeah, like a
hymn is a song. Right? I never went to church. I don't know these things.
It's a good question. And the reason why we've done well, it's with hymnals, is because people have churches, and I guess that they're like, we need to buy. Some of our books got kind of screwed up, so we need to buy.
I don't think they would put it in that terms, but yeah, sure.
They've been touched by the devil. So people are willing to pay $15 to $30 for a hymnal. Right. So I got a whole box of them for free. So I'm like,
You're profiting off of God.
That's a great Scavenger of the week.
So my Scavenger of the week was, I bought a table lot of lamps at the auction for $15. How many lamps are there? 6 or 7 lamps, 8 lamps. And some of them are a little bit cheesy. I left one of them there. I was like, this thing's hideous and huge. Oh, God. Most of them were, actually all of them that I'm looking at are cool. Vintage, solid. One of them's solid brass. One of them's this, like, amazing 1970s. It's got smoky glass with, like, an actual black marble base with, like, cast brass. I was like, this is super tacky, but it's actually good quality materials. Like, usually this is like a cheap knockoff fake fancy, but this one's actually really nice. So I think I can do well with them for $15.
Well, that's a good example of having imagination, because I even look at them right now and I'm like, these are
they're
total
cool
junk. So
as
you
individual pieces. They are good.
So you have the imagination of who's going to buy these and why. So we'll see.
Yeah.
I mean, plus at $15, you can't go wrong.
I sold 2 lamps last week, 2 huge table lamps, for a couple $100 total. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, like I'm making a good decision here on these like
Lamps are your jam.
lamps.
And then the other thing is that we got at the auction that I bought was a big box of flatware
Silver plated.
for $120.
Now that's a bit high.
Now, this is where I kind of got caught up in like one of my guys who
It's called a pissing match.
Yeah.
I'll say that.
and I was like, this guy's not going to get this.
Was it the same guy?
No, he was
a different guy.
And I was
different guy.
I'm going to get this from him. But
man.
it's a huge lot.
It's a huge, yeah.
And this is the thing with flatware. I'm not an expert.
No.
But this is my gamble, that if we can identify the pattern, because there's different patterns in there.
Yeah.
So we make small piles,
Right.
figure out what their patterns are, and sell them into
Right.
eventually. So if you can sell 30, 40, 50,
Yeah,
and if there's enough of them, then you make up the money that
The
way.
other thing, too, is we've always done well with flatware.
Right.
I mean, we enjoy selling it. We enjoy finding it, researching it.
Yeah, this is a little bit. It's
So-
different because it's like a silver plated kind of shiny a silver. So
Yeah.
we'll
Usually
see.
we do mid-century. This
Right.
is more like a frou-frou kind
Right.
of.
So it's definitely more getting to the experiment of are we willing to pay more and
And make more.
We'll see. Okay, just some random things before we talk about our numbers. This is something that you had brought up about
Yes.
when we buy online.
Right.
Before you buy on Amazon, you'll check on eBay.
Yeah, so I was buying something this week, and I was like, oh, I'll just buy it on Amazon. But we don't have a Prime account anymore. And I know from selling stuff on Amazon that you bring the price up for Prime. You're like, if this is Prime coming from their warehouse, I'm bumping the price up because they're getting it faster and I'm paying more in fees. Frankly.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. There are people who say that they regularly get stuff cheaper on Prime. I just never found
seen that
to be true.
Especially for small items. Like,
I found that people who sold on Prime were raising their prices because they're like, well, people are filtering out everything else except Prime,
Right.
and they're willing to pay a premium to get it faster.
So for me, I needed an item that was basically an $8 item. And I was like, well, I don't have Prime anymore, so that means I have to pay for shipping. And then I thought, I kind of want to make sure I'm buying from an individual seller on eBay. And the other thing, now that I think about it, was I did have my spring eBay bucks because I have a buying account. So I signed up for eBay bucks. So I had $8 in eBay bucks. So I basically bought like a $9-ish item and I paid $1. But I think it is worth it. And it was like free shipping. So it was worth it for me to do it on eBay. But the ironic thing is when I got it, it came from the Amazon warehouse. So whoever's selling it on Amazon Prime is the same seller as eBay. And they just have their stuff at Amazon and had it sent to me, which was kind of funny. I was like, oh, it's probably the same person. But it was cheaper on eBay. So I don't know. It's just one of those things.
And who knows? It might have been. It's one of those guys where they don't control any other inventory. They just they'll just put up things online, and if someone buys it, they then buy it off of Amazon and have it shipped to you, and they make like 10 cents, but they didn't have to.
Although I think it said on there fulfilled by Amazon or something. Like it didn't seem like it was like from a different seller. Like there was something that made me think,
okay.
this is like them fulfilling an order to me through Amazon. But then you're just like, it was a commodity item, so it's kind of hard to be like, I just want to buy from an individual seller at their house on eBay. And you're like, oh, I just bought from the same dude that's on Amazon. But it was cheaper.
Okay, let's talk about our numbers for this past week. So again, we had another good week on eBay. It just continues. That's not to brag. It's just, it makes me feel good. And I'm just like, I'm waiting for the summer slowdown to start. I mean, It's not summertime yet, but it's just like, it seems like it comes every year, and so every week we can, have a good week before the summertime. I'm like,
it's good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so we sold 62 items for about $2,100. That's great for us.
Awesome.
Yeah, I know, right? I mean,
it's incredible. I can't believe those numbers.
Then on our second store, we did pretty well. We sold 18 items for almost $700. So again,
That's
our second
still
store,
high for the second store.
our second store has been doing good.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
again, it seems like either our rental or our eBay business is doing well right when we need it to. And
Yeah.
it's really nice.
It's very
you know.
helpful.
Okay, things we sold. The first thing we sold was a pair of shoes for $2.54.
We need to explain that one. Okay, this pair of shoes is, I think, one of maybe the oldest item in our store. The photo was taken back at our old house that we lived in before we finished our house.
It's
in
like when we first started our business.
like 2009. I mean, that is ridiculous, but it's just one of those shoes that's like a generic junky small size, like size 5 or something. And eventually we were just like, I think I put it down to like $3. Well, it sold for $2.50. And it was one of those things where I'm like, I don't even care. Just get it out of my house.
There are people asking right now. They're like, Ryan, why didn't you just take
Get
it
rid
off
of
your
them?
store and get rid of
Because
it?
I don't even want to take the time to go get it, end the listing, make sure I donated it. It's like, just leave it in the store.
I mean, that's an example of we probably made just enough to cover our
the
fees
cost of that. Yeah.
on that thing.
But whatever.
But it is interesting because it's also like a little time capsule for us, because I looked at it, and the reason why we know it's that old is because of how we used to take pictures.
Right.
We had this bamboo mat.
It had a bamboo, or it's like a straw mat.
And we also would only take pictures at night with like these fluorescent lights.
Right.
So it just, I mean,
But
really,
they weren't like, it wasn't like a setup like people have now where it looks professional with
Right.
like the light
No.
boxes. It was like, there's like an old white sheet behind it.
Right.
Because that was the only time we had to take photos.
it's an interesting time capsule because it's very humbling. It reminds us like we were not very good at what we were doing. The quality of the shoes was very poor. It's a no-name brand, and they were in pretty bad shape, but we were still selling stuff, and the only reason why we were doing well is we were consistent. We just listed a lot of stuff, and then we would learn from what we were doing, and we improved our quality.
Right, over time.
Yeah, so, anyone that's just starting out, I get it that, you're trying to improve. It's a process, and we all go through it, But that's why I'm kind of amazed when I see some people start and their photos are already great. They're already selling good stuff. I'm like, man, they're like way ahead of the curve already.
Because they listen to our podcast.
Well.
Okay, they learned from us not knowing in the beginning.
Well, I hope that's true.
Yeah. So you sold this item. I think you paid $10 or $15 for.
I sold exactly 10. I paid exactly $10.
$10. Okay. For an iSight camera, new in the box, like one of the first iSights.
Yeah, like if anyone has a Mac or, it knows about Mac products, this was back in the early 2000s, 2005.
Before they had cameras in the laptops.
Right.
Before people had laptops, really.
Well, no, it wasn't before. It was when laptops didn't have cameras built in.
Okay.
And so it was like a barrel camera.
Yeah.
But it's really cool.
It's a really nice camera.
And that it would... it's clip on to the thing. So anyway, it was brand new in the box, which is amazing. Normally people sell them like $150. I was like, let's sell this fast. I put it at $100 and it sold
really
in a couple
fast.
weeks. And this was one of those experiments where we're trying to do it, or at least I am willing to pay more for quality items so they'll sell fast.
Yeah.
So we made $90 on that in just a couple weeks.
That's pretty good. We bought this vintage chic razor. It's a razor holder. It's not the actual like sharp razor thing. And it was silver plated. You bought it for like $25-$30, which is high. I mean, that's really
Crazy
high
money.
for us.
But it's like art. It's
Art
like
Deco. It's from
right.
the 30s. It had a leather case. We bought it in New York City during Christmas, and you sold it for a best offer of $75, which is not high enough for me, but at the same time, it was one of those things where we're like, let's just move it out the door and make $50.
$50. Yeah, I was really hoping it's when I paid $25. It's for that thing. I was like, I hope I make like $200.
Right.
But
it wasn't. But the people who make 200 they're like gold plated.
Right.
Yeah.
And so again, it was an experiment that didn't work out as well as I wanted. But hey, we made
fine.
$50.
Yeah. I sold a pair of 2 wool blankets that we bought in Amsterdam a couple of years ago, and they're beautiful wool, like velvet lined on the edges. Has this great logo of like an elk or something. And I just took an offer of $130 for both of them, which is half of what I was asking. I was asking for $130 each.
And and to me, it's one of those things where they're such cool blankets and they're so well made, and that it's just disappointed that we didn't make more. But
I've been sitting on them for 2 years.
It's one of those things. Sometimes it just doesn't happen. Like if it doesn't have a specific brand
like
on it that people are going after.
Yeah.
And it's also crazy too that we carried those things all the way from Amsterdam in our carry-on bag.
Right.
But
that was free, but still,
it's one of those things,
Okay, so your pencil and pen and eraser pipeline continues to sell.
You sold $90. It's worth of like some old erasers
to one person.
Yeah,
great. I'm just like, you're amazing.
So I invested $75 in like an entire shopping cart.
It's basically 3 of those big Rubbermaid bins full of them.
So we'll be selling those off for the next 12 months or so or more. Then we also sold 2 more paint by its numbers for $65. And this is a lot that I bought for $1.
It was just this bag. It was
bundle
basically
of
a
them.
bundle bundled up. And
we've been selling them for about $30-$40 each. So it's great.
Okay, so the biggest, most amazing sale that we saved for last, we sold a Burberry trench coat for $680. Trust me, when I saw that on my phone, I was like, what?
We were like lying on the couch kind of late at night and went watching a movie. Well, it's late to us, 9 o'clock.
It's 9 o'clock.
It felt late.
Yeah.
That's getting close to our bedtime. And then we got this sale. And it's one of those sales where you like pop up and you're like,
or you
stop everything.
You think you're not reading it right. You're like, that can't be what it says.
And it's cool. We bought it for only $20. I think it was being sold low because the person just didn't know what they had, and also it had
some marks on it. It didn't have the wool liner,
right? Well, it didn't come with the wool liner, so
it's like one without a wool liner. Oh well, okay.
But because it was a little bit like rough, but we brought it home and cleaned it up, and it looked great. You
know what? With that Burberry, it's so funny. I just threw it in the washing machine. Like I didn't do anything special. I put it on gentle. I think I threw some like OxyClean in there, and it came out well. There were still some light marks on parts of it, but it wasn't bad. So the thing about a sale that's this high, it's getting delivered today because I'm like tracking it. Like I have like email alert tracking on it. And what you hope is that it fits and that they don't return it. I mean, you sell it and you're like, great. But honestly, until the time goes by and they don't return it, that's the real test.
Yeah, I know.
But we've had good luck. I mean, we sold another Burberry for $700 a few years ago to someone in Japan, actually. And it was fine.
But people know that, they have also heard this podcast where we've been like, remember that thing we sold a week ago? And someone's now returning it. So stay tuned for next week.
Yeah, you'll hear about it.
And then the last thing is, out of the 66 items we sold on our main store, 22 of those were some kind of clothing or shoes.
So 1/3.
About a third of our items, just kind of bread and butter, 15. I mean, we don't like to sell $15 items, but some of them are like T-shirts or ties.
But you know what? The thing about T-shirts and ties for us, they are a pipeline. Like you said, a third of our sales were ties, shirts, a pair of pants.
Now, we don't specifically scavenge things and be like, I'm going to make it's $15
on this.
We scavenge things hoping it's worth $30, and then when we start to actually put it up online, let's
just move it. Yeah.
We're not going to get $30, it is what it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, so just different kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Customer issues. we didn't really have any customer issues.
Nope, I had one
this week.
return in our second store of someone who bought something by accident. She's like, I didn't know what this was. I didn't know what I was ordering. So she took responsibility for it.
Yeah.
She returned it. I gave her her money back. I relisted it. No problem.
And this is just kind of a continuing story from last week where we were talking about kind of difficult buyers or even just difficult people who
they haven't even bought anything
even
yet.
if you block them. So there's this guy who wants this T-shirt that it was up for $16. He was just adamant where he wasn't going to pay more than $15.
Shipped.
He didn't want to pay more than $15, which is fair enough. And we just chose we didn't want to sell it that cheap with free
shipping. So we're going to make $12.
But he was like really kind of arrogant and angry, so we just blocked him. And then once we blocked him, we just stopped talking to him. He continues to send. He's still sending us.
He sent us a message. This morning.
All this week, every other day, we'll get a new message from him, like asking him. He's like, "It hasn't sold yet. Just sell it to me for the price I want." And so we ignore him. What we've actually started to do is kind of troll him. Where every time he sends a message, instead of answering him, we just raise the price by $2. So he starts getting angry, like, "Hey, why are you raising the price?"
And what he said, the most, I just laughed about this all week. So we raised the price because it's funny to us, and he's like, "I took a seminar on sales. I know that if something's not selling, you don't raise the price." It's just like, dude. Well, the funny thing is we blocked him, so he has no way of buying this, even if he decides to buy it.
But the funny thing is, to us, is that his final one, I don't know if it'll be his final one to us. The last one he sent us was, he said, "Okay, I'll buy it for the price that you're asking. Does it smell, and can I return it if I don't, if I don't enjoy it?" And I mean, of course, we don't answer him. I do not want this guy to buy because he's telling us up front
he's going to return it. Oh, and he asked us to iron it.
Right. He said, "And will you
iron it as a courtesy?"
Yeah.
Like, it's just so funny because at one point yesterday I was like, I feel like this is a joke. I feel like someone's like joking around. Maybe it's a podcast listener. Yeah, I don't know. It's too ridiculous.
Yeah, so Ryan has a theory that he's trolling us by being so silly, and maybe he is
crazy.
But the thing is, we're not doing anything other than playing around by raising the price.
It's just funny.
But again, like we say for anyone who is, it's new to the podcast or selling on eBay, it's a good example. If you don't have a good feeling about a buyer, you have the power to not sell to that person.
Yeah, you don't have to.
And not to get sucked into like a back and forth. Just silence and block and it's move on.
Right.
Okay, things we learned in the forum. It was a really good week of conversations. All right, we'll go through this. It's real quick. I just wanted to kind of shout out to people that were bringing up some good stuff. So TSAT.
Yeah.
He found an interview with an eBay employee about the guaranteed shipping program.
So that's the new thing that they've introduced.
And so I will put a link to it on the blog so that you can check it out. And the employee does say that if you ship on time, eBay will take it from there. So if for some reason the post office doesn't get it to the buyer on time, eBay is the one who will then give the buyer a coupon.
That's amazing.
Which is amazing. So to me, I was like, wow, somebody. It was just like some guy on YouTube. He did this video interview. It's with an eBay employee, and I'm like, I wish more eBay employees would talk directly to people.
That's really cool.
So people were like, well, why did you ask eBay? And I'm like, how do I talk to eBay?
How do I find someone?
Other than just like sending a message to like customer service.
Right.
So people say, well, here's like a press list. It's like press@ebay.com.
Well, okay then.
So I started a thread where I was like, okay, if you want me to talk to someone from eBay, give me a list of things that you guys are interested in hearing. Mm-hmm. So I'll put a link to that, and people have been putting interesting things. So I actually emailed this press at ebay.com and just said who I was and put a link to the forum and the podcast.
Wow.
So we'll see if anyone gets back.
That's cool. I had no idea you did that.
I did.
That's cool.
So I will put a link to that it's forum posts, and if people have things they want to ask. I've not been approved, and I don't know how we'll go, but we'll see.
No, we'll see. We'll try.
Julie B.
Yes, she posted about actually a Netflix show, which is about a woman who started an eBay business called Nasty Gal. It's a funny, trailer for the show.
I mean, I thought it was going to be like a documentary about her, but it's like a scripted, like Orange
show.
Is the it's a New Black kind of show, and it's about this girl or young lady who started an eBay store. She actually got kicked off of eBay, and then she's like, well, I'll just make my own online store.
Right.
And this was back in 2006.
2006, I think, yeah.
And she wasn't fooling around. She went from just working out of her house to getting a warehouse and employees. What's interesting is that in 2012 she actually got $49 million in venture capital. Yeah. So we're not talking about doing what we do. She then built an actual company. They stopped doing vintage. She started selling just kind of hipster clothes.
Stuff, yeah.
And then I guess she burned through that in 4 years because they now went bankrupt. So they
filed bankruptcy last year.
Yeah. But the trailer was interesting because it was she's in a thrift store and she's talking to the owner of the thrift store how much is that coat? And he's like, oh, it's $5, and she buys it and she's like, sucker, this is worth $100.
Yeah.
It's like people said, she's not really giving people like us a good
I know, it kind of makes
vibe.
us look bad. But what's interesting is that this Netflix series happened. I bet they shot it before she went bankrupt, though, which is really funny. You're like, oh, well. But, when companies or small startups or whatever get venture capital, I think a lot of people, when they hear venture capital, they don't understand that that's essentially a loan. It's not just rich people are giving you money to make more money. They are, but they want their money back with interest. It's a loan. Right.
I mean, and they're basically buying into the company. So
yeah, they're buying.
And they take over the company. Yeah. But, hey, at the end of the day, she seemed very, she had great ideas, a lot of energy. And supposedly she's still worth tens of millions of dollars. So she is just swimming in a pile of money. So good for her. Okay, Steve, a list. He reminded people that if you ever get a neutral or negative feedback, even if you can't get it taken down, that you can still leave a comment under that.
Yes.
And that's true.
Yes, and you should. If you can't get it taken down, you should definitely reply to it.
And eBay doesn't make it easy to do that. So there's a forum post here, and someone puts a link on where.
Yeah, I have to bookmark it. It's bookmarked because I can't find it easily. I don't even know where. I have to Google it every time.
And and I think this comes up because we had a caller a week ago who was like, "I got this negative feedback. I don't know how to get it taken away. I feel like it's feedback extortion. eBay won't take it away." And so I do want to remind people that sometimes that's just the way it is.
You can't.
You're going to, if you sell in any significant quantity online on eBay, that having a neutral or negative feedback is going to happen.
It's just going to happen.
Some people have perfectly spotless 100% feedback. That's incredible. Good for them. We always have at least one or two all the time.
Right.
Because they stay on a record for 12 months, and right when the 12 months comes around and we're going to get 100%, it seems like we always get
one.
Another one. And it's okay.
Yeah.
It's just the way it is. And the last thing was Tara. She posted kind of a fun explanation of the 5 stages of the scavenger life.
Yeah.
Where she walks through the stages of her online store.
Right, which is similar to ours.
And it's just like what we experience. It's really kind of smart, where you first are just selling stuff. It's for cheap, just like that cheap pair of shoes that if you sold, taking bad pictures.
Yeah.
And then you have a moment where you sell something for a lot of money,
and you can't believe somebody
$75.
I remember we sold a pair of Red Wing vintage Irish setters. It was on auction. One of your friends was visiting, and he was like, "You guys are so funny." They sold for $130, and we were like, "We can't believe it!"
And actually, now that I think about it, I'm like, we could have probably sold those for $400.
More. Yeah, we could have, but we didn't know any better.
I can remember the one that made my eyes kind of pop out was we sold this like wool coat, the blue
wool coat,
puffy coat
for $200.
For $200, and I was like, "This is a joke. No one's gonna whoever bought this isn't gonna really pay us money." And I'm like, "Wow!"
And now I'm like, I should have sold that for more.
And then Tara says, and then the stage I guess we're all in now, or
some of us are
like, okay. Instead of spending my time selling low price items, we can now go out and with pretty much good confidence be buying things that we know we're going to make a lot of money on,
right?
And that's a great kind of gift,
right?
It's cool,
but you have to get to that point.
Yeah,
I mean, you have to gain the
stages.
Confidence.
Now, I don't know what the stage is after that. If that's and then you're hiring employees and all that stuff.
I don't know. Yeah, well, we did hire an employee,
so there you go.
Okay, you can always call us on our voicemail line to ask us a question or to make a comment. The phone number is 540-407-8486. You have 3 minutes to leave a message. 3 minutes, or you will get cut off.
Yeah, hi, Ryan and Jay. My name is Joe, calling from Michigan today. I just had a quick photo tip for some of the eBay users out there. I like to use white seamless paper for all backgrounds for all my images. I know you guys have a video background, so you know what I'm talking about. It's available at any photographic supply store. Generally, I'll take my pictures outside on a cloudy day. I'm trying to take pictures in direct light. And then I'll take my pictures into a photo editing software and just do a quick white balance. So the nice thing with the white seamless background is you don't have any shadows, and now you have a good reference for what white should be. And it'll really make your pictures pop, and it'll make your colors more accurate on your products. So good luck to everybody out there, and keep up the good work. Thanks.
That is a good idea.
I mean, I think that's a great idea. We actually did that for a short period of time where I actually got a poster board.
It was 2 pieces of poster board or something.
And then, you kind of bend it into a corner where it look like there's no shadow or anything.
Yeah, you can make a seamless board like
so
that.
It looks like that where, it looks like kind of a magazine where the image is floating.
It looks really good. I got super lazy about it, and we were like, we're just going to take a picture on a wood floor against a white wall, and the white is the white balance essentially. Right. So that works for us. But that's very good advice.
Yeah.
Hey guys, this is Brandon from Fort Wayne, Indiana. Just listening to the episode this week, and I wanted to just add a little bit more information on. You guys were talking about the global shipping program, and not sure if they repackage items or not. And I don't think any of us really know what totally goes on in there. They haven't given total definitive information on what the inner workings are of the program there at the warehouse in Kentucky. But I did learn from experience that they did repackage one of my orders, at least. It was a set of 2 radios, both listed on the same listing, and I shipped them in the same box to Kentucky, and got an email or an eBay message from the buyer saying that they received a box with 1 radio in it. And I was a little bit concerned right off the bat because I knew for sure I'd shipped the 2 radios. And I asked them to send me a picture of the packaging just out of curiosity. And it was a different box and everything that radio came in. So my first step was to ask them just to wait another day. They were kind of antsy. They wanted me just to refund them right away, But sure enough, I talked them into waiting 1 day, and the other radio showed up in a separate box the next day. So just the experience I had, apparently the global shipping program does repackage some items, and maybe somebody else out there has some more information too. Maybe we can get it all figured out. So I thought I'd throw that in. Enjoy the podcast. Thanks a lot, guys. Bye.
Yeah, I don't know. It's funny because when the global shipping program first came out, they were like, it goes to the warehouse and we repackage it. And so in my mind, I was like, they repackage everything. And then I'm like, they don't have time to repackage everything.
Yeah, I mean,
there's no way.
If you think of the volume of stuff they're dealing with.
Yeah.
And I think he's bringing that up because we had talked about, we had a buyer complain about something.
Some damage.
On a book. And we were like, the way
How
we
could
packaged
a book
it,
get damaged?
in a box. So we don't know. It's for sure.
Right.
The good news is, and I don't think he said that part of the story as how global shipping dealt it with that problem. Like, did the buyer get a refund from eBay or?
Well, the second box came the next day.
Came the next day. Okay,
yeah.
gotcha.
So there was no refund needed.
Right.
So but it was smart of him to be like, just wait an extra day, which is crazy that he had to do that. Like, there should be complete tracking on both boxes, but maybe there wasn't.
Well,
so yeah, it's a little wacky.
Overall, I'm a big fan.
Look, I love the global shipping program, but here's something that I wish that eBay did do, because I do get a lot of messages saying, and this is usually after someone's made an offer and then they see the shipping price for global shipping, someone in Germany or wherever, and they're like, oh, can you ship this cheaper? And I'm like, you already made the offer. I already accepted. It's already like a transaction. And I don't want to make another transaction. I wish that, I don't know what it looks like to an international seller when they buy something and eBay sends them the invoice. Does it say, this is eBay's global shipping program? It's fast, it's insured, it has full tracking, you don't have to pay customs at your door, blah, blah, blah. Because I feel that I have to explain that to people when they're like, can you do this cheaper? And I'm like, no, and here's why. This is a better service, it's faster, it's fully insured, it's fully tracked, you pay customs ahead of time.
But we will also say, if you look at its numbers themselves, we've compared where someone's like, please ship this cheaper. So we'll go and say, okay, if we ship this
to France,
first class, oftentimes it's actually the same price.
It's the same price, or in certain times it's been more expensive.
Right.
And I'm like, it's actually more expensive to send this through the regular
I totally
mail.
hear you. People in Canada are like, it's crazy.
People in Canada,
we're basically America. Just send it to me regular.
Cheap, I agree.
Don't send it to wherever, Kentucky, and then have it get sent to me. So I get that part, but there are other parts.
We need a better partnership between USPS and Canada Post. We need to merge those entities.
Canada, why don't you just become part of our country? Maybe it's your niceness will rub off on us, and we'll give you guns.
You know what? The Canadians listening, there's probably 3 of them, they're like, why don't you become the United States of Canada?
Hey.
It's not the other way around.
Why not?
We should.
Hello, Jay. Hello, Ryan. This is Tommy 2, calling from Florida. I want to share an experience with a zero feedback buyer. And I don't know if this is going to be a good experience because I haven't shipped the item out yet. But I want to at least talk about what happened initially. When I went to the shipping label part, no problem buying the item and paying for it real fast. It was a really unusual address. And what I did is I went to Google and kind of pieced things together and came up with the right address. The address that was provided was 9550 Manny, as in the name Manny, M-A-N-N-Y, Miles Muse, M-E-W-S-E, Illicit City, Strange, Maryland. There is no illicit city in Maryland. So I pieced things together. The first thing I did is I emailed the buyer twice. I shipped within the 24 hours and said, hey, this address isn't right. Can you provide me the correct address? And I doctored it up and made it real friendly and all that. And no response. And second day, that's when I did my Google investigative work and came up with what I thought must be the right address. It was 9550 Many Mile Muse. 3 words, Many Mile Muse, in Columbia, Maryland. Their name was right, the zip code was right, and the state was right. Everything else was wrong.
So I emailed again the buyer to have them confirm that, yes, that is indeed my shipping address. No response. The next day I called, and the phone message, the answering machine, that the message they provided was something to the effect of, this is Redneck Haven, press 1 and say 1, because we're not going to know what the heck you're talking about. Beep. I said, oh, brother, here we go. So then I called eBay, and what they did is they went to the shipping label, and they clicked change, and they changed those words around, the 9550 Manny Mile Muse, and put in 9550 Many Mile Muse, and then it auto-corrected to Columbia, Maryland, instead of Illicit City, which there is none, Maryland. Now, there is a city, Ellicott, I'm not from Maryland, so I don't know, Ellicott City. There is an Ellicott City, Maryland. So they even got that wrong, the spelling for that. Well, while I was talking to eBay, the buyer called me, and it was a really nice, good-mannered young man, 19 years old, first time on eBay. His parents have really been pushing him, and he said it's been a learning curve, and we had a little discussion. And in any case, I'm shipping that package out today, and we'll see how it all goes.
Jay and Ryan, this is Tom, Tommy 2, calling from Florida with part 3 of the Zero Feedback Buyer. So last night, I'm finished work, regular job, watching some TV, zoning out, and I get a text with a couple of photos of this little truck. It's a little HO scale for trains. It's probably 6 inches long, but it's depicting a tractor-trailer truck. I get 2 pictures text to me by this buyer, and the truck is on his train table, and it's looking good. He's added some items to it, put a helicopter on the flatbed. It looked really cool. I text him back and said, wow, cool, thanks. And then he sends me a YouTube video. He actually did an unboxing. It was his first eBay purchase. He did an unboxing. It was so gracious. I was so humbled watching this 19-year-old do this. And then he made another YouTube video featuring his new truck from eBay on his train table with the trains going all around. You've seen those train tables before. So it was really cool. What a happy ending of a transaction I was going to cancel right from the get-go because of a crazy address and a crazy phone message. Imagine. Bye-bye.
Okay, that is 3 calls in a row that we got. But it was a story that happened, and it was smart of you to message your buyer about their address. I think most of us would have just sent it to the address. Like, you gave me this address, and I'm sending it to you.
Right, because eBay will always back us up.
Right.
If you ship to what they tell you to ship it to, they will back you up if there's ever a problem,
Yeah, but I understand you looking at that thinking, this is the weirdest, address I've ever seen. But it sounds like it turned out well, and it was good of you to be patient with this new buyer and figure it out with them.
And plus, I think that's the kind of fun thing about those of us that sell on eBay, that people are buying kind of weird, quirky things that they really have a lot of emotional investment in.
Right.
And a train, for instance, like a toy or something like that, and that, it's more than just like, oh, I bought some socks or something.
Right. So well, it's like fun. It's like when you send someone a vintage item is kind of one of a kind, and it gets damaged in shipping, and it's so heartbreaking for you and for the buyer when you're like, that's a one of a kind item. It's not just like, this is damaged, I need another one. You're like, there is no other one.
Yeah.
So.
Hey guys, this is Retro Treasures WB from the blog. I was just calling about 2 of the questions from your last show. The first one is the issue with holding an item for a buyer. There's actually a really simple solution to that. If they message you before they buy, you just change the handling time, and then you have as long as you need. And if they message you after they buy, it'll take a little talking with the person, but you can actually cancel the item, relist it, change the handling time, and have them buy it again. And that'll get you completely out of that situation. The worst thing you'll have to do is call eBay and get your fees back for the first one, unless you do it with a canceled because the buyer asks. And I think the fees are automatically refunded then. The second issue was the lady with the FedEx problem. I've actually had a similar problem with FedEx. I shipped a very large package, very heavy, and being a shipping nerd like Ryan, I was very meticulous with the measurements and knowing FedEx could potentially charge me extra after the fact. I added 2 inches to every dimension, and I also added 20 pounds to the weight, just to give me plenty of cushion. And after they had already delivered it, they back charged me $38 on that package. And because they went ahead and delivered it, there's nothing I could do to defend myself. And that's contrary to the post office's practice. They'll hold the package and make your postage due. And I've had that situation. I was able to call the post office and have them remeasure it with the postmaster, and they agreed with me that I was right, and they fixed it. So, yeah, FedEx just has some problems. They do some things good. You never know. But I agree with that seller that FedEx messed with them, and it's unfortunate, but it happens with them. I've been there, too. Anyways, do a great job of the show. Thanks a lot. See y'all later.
All right, finally we hear from Retro Treasures WV, who's very active on the forum.
Yep, and he's actually a neighbor from a neighboring state.
So here's the thing about people asking to hold packages. The problem is, and this has been my experience, they never ask you before they buy. Right. They never do. They're like, oh, I just bought this from you. Can you ship it in 2 weeks? And you're like, dope.
Yeah, I mean, so look. Yeah, you know, someone brought the idea up of having them do a signature confirmation, and it is true. The mail won't hold it forever.
Right.
After a certain time, if the person doesn't come pick it up, they'll ship it back to you. So it was just like one idea. Look, the reality is, I think this has only happened to us three times.
I mean,
so it really isn't.
And one time I said no.
It really isn't.
I just sent it.
It really isn't a problem that for us it needs to get solved. But people like to be, smart and think of different ways.
Yeah.
Because we don't have to ship perfectly, even if we get dinged for a shipping late on one item. It really isn't a big deal.
It's not huge, but it does stink. But in terms of FedEx, the thing about FedEx is, like, you just named exactly what the problem is with, like, a company that is just a private company. I mean, it's like, they can do it and they can disagree with you, and that's the end of it. There's no appeal process. And that's what's great, I find, about the post office. Like you said, you can call the local postmaster of the place you sent it to and be like, please weigh it and measure it, and I know I'm right, and my person does not owe postage. And you were able to, work with a real person and fix it, which is great. So, yeah, I hear you on just dimensional weight. It's crazy and hard to defend sometimes. It doesn't make sense.
Hi, Jay and Ryan. This is Alex. And I wanted to comment on someone asked a question that someone had on a previous podcast. He called in and wanted to know whether he should have artwork restored or not. And two comments I wanted to make on it. First of all, if anybody wants to get restoration work done on artwork, or they want an estimate or whatnot, what I always do is call, if they're in a big city or they're near a big city, or it doesn't matter, they can call a large city museum, one of the bigger museums, better known museums, and ask to speak to someone in the restoration department and say, I realize you don't do it for the public, but could you recommend someone in the area who does restoration work? And they normally will turn you on to somebody really good. The second part is I came back. I had been in London for a long time, and I bought a couple large lithographs that were signed from a manor house that was falling apart. And I wasn't sure whether I should restore them or not. I took them, at the time I was living in Chicago, I took them to the museum there, and they said, oh my God, you never find things this big. These are fantastic. And they turned me on to a guy who did the restoration work. And it took forever because of the delicacy of the work, and it was a fortune. This was in the 80s, and it cost me over $1,000 to have the two restored. So I just wanted to give people an idea of what restoration really costs. It's very expensive, and you have to look at how much money you're going to get, obviously, which you said, out of the piece. And oftentimes, I find if I'm going to sell something, it might be better to photograph and list the damage and let the person decide whether or not they want to handle that. Because by the time you have the restoration work done and tie up your time as well as the money, I really question whether you get anything out of it. You know, it wouldn't be cost effective. So I just want to make a comment on that, and thank you for all your podcasts. Bye-bye.
Well, that's super interesting. I didn't think about that. I mean, we were just like, don't even think about it, just sell it. But it's interesting if you wanted to pursue it or at least get a price, to go to a local, school or a university museum. Or a museum. They would know.
Or the nearest city, like the nearest city for us is D.C., and clearly there's like National Archives.
Now, I will say, sometimes doing stuff like that, regardless of cost, is kind of an adventure.
Yeah.
You know, it helps you.
$1,000 is a lot.
Yeah, but doing any kind of like work like that, you meet certain people, you kind of learn a new thing. Like, it might be interesting to find the guy that does this, like,
right.
like who dedicates their life to like cleaning artwork.
Restoration, yeah.
For instance, we bought a clock, a broken clock. And but it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And we were like, we'll just redonate it. But your sister had been like, well, let's find a person that fixes clocks.
Now, that being said, this is a clock with like a cheap plastic quartz movement. Like, it's not like a...
Right, but the point is like, right. It needed to get fixed by someone that knows. And your sister found a guy who lives in our area, and you guys went there.
We went to his house, yeah.
And it sounded like kind of like an adventure.
Yeah, it was cool. And so I emailed him the other day, like, okay, just let me know when it'll be done, and we'll come by. So you and I will probably go pick it up. So it is fun to just...
Because
people like
because
that.
He works in the middle of the country, just out of his house, and you said that he had these like
amazing
super expensive
clocks.
Like antique clocks,
amazing, gorgeous, 17th century French mantle clocks.
And I know that you don't always have patience, kind of talking to quirky people, but I love talking to those people about like
you'll like him a lot.
How people organize their lives to do these kind of like wacky, like really niche jobs.
What was funny is, so he's near us in rural Virginia, and he was like, oh, I work with a clock shop down in Florida that sends me their stuff. And we were like, that's weird. Yeah. But if they like him and have a relationship with him and can trust him, it doesn't really matter where he is if they just, ship something up to him.
And I think this... as a woman brought up a good point that a lot of us have said, you have to see, if something's going to cost $1,000 to
is it worth?
Is our work worth $10,000?
Right. So
and all the time. It? So it's, for instance, we one time bought a really nice old camera for about $100.
A Rolleiflex.
Right. And we looked it up, and we saw we could probably sell it for $1,000. So I think we spent $200
getting it in working order,
fixed and cleaned up
and tested.
So we were $300 in, but we sold it for almost $1,000. That was
worth it for us. But it was an adventure.
But also, it was an adventure. We had to find a little camera shop, and we learned about the camera, and it was fun.
And for future reference, we knew how much it cost to get it into working order and tested. And so maybe next time we're like, okay.
But overall, takeaway, too long, didn't read, is you don't have to get things in perfect order to sell them. I think that's the big takeaway.
Because there's someone else willing to either not restore it and keep it the way it is.
Or they know how to do it themselves.
Yeah.
Or it's good enough.
Leave it up to them. Exactly. Okay, that is it for the podcast this week. You can check out the blog for the links we discussed and to join the conversation on the forums. You can leave a question or a comment on something you heard on the voicemail line. The number is 540-407-8486. We post an episode every Monday morning. On Wednesday, we post a What Sells video by Stephen Schultz that shows you what got sold and how much he sold it for. Plus, there's always a little clip of his dogs that is super cute. You can subscribe to us through iTunes or through YouTube, so you always get the latest episode. You can listen to our other podcast. We just posted an update on Shampoo and Booze after a little break, and that is at shampooandbooze.com. And if you're interested in renting our vacation farmhouse during the peak season, you can. The link is on shampooandbooze.com.
Please come.
Please come visit us. We are ending this podcast in 3,
2, 1. Bye.